Anthony is going to examine with us the origins of the post-truth world and consider whether it represents a corruption of intellectual integrity and a potentially damaging influence on the fabric of democracy. He will consider the impacts of social media in a world where opinion can be worth more than fact. After his talk, there will be time for questions. Please join me in welcoming Anthony.
Well, in all debate about society, about morality, about the past, history, in philosophy itself, that same principle, the principle of intellectual integrity, is very important. The preparedness to change one's mind and to accept evidence and arguments when they coerce us to change our minds. So that idea is central to the idea of dialectic, and when you apply it to those cases where there aren't definite answers, where there is no right or wrong or truth, but where we are, by our best lights, under an obligation to form a judgment and to act on that judgment, then we have to remember what the French poet Paul Valéry said. And you will remember, he said, "Une difficulté est une lumière." A difficulty is a light. Mais une difficulté insurmontable est le soleil. An insurmountable difficulty is the sun. Because even if you can't come to an answer, or get to a conclusion, find out how things really are, nevertheless, the endeavor to do so is extraordinarily illuminating. You learn so much in the process. The BBC always say to their reporters, you cannot say or report anything unless you have at least 2 completely independent sources of verification for what you're about to say. But talk to BBC reporters now and they will tell you that when they hunt for 2 independent sources, it's not enough any longer, because the same distorted source or false source or polluted source can easily appear in very remotely different parts of the internet under different disguises and yet have the same toxic origin. And so it is no longer easy to rely without any question on the information that you can get from the internet unless you are very good at evaluating it and you are very skeptical and critical of it and you check it. Now, I love to tell the following story, which illustrates the great importance of doing this. I have a philosophical colleague in France by the name of Bernard-Henri Lévy. Any of you come across him? He's extremely handsome, and he has a wonderful sartorial style because he wears his shirts open to his belly button. It's sort of décolleté, rather magnificent hairy chest. And I said to him once, by the way, he has flowing locks. And it's not necessary to have flowing locks to be a philosopher, by the way, but he has them. And I said to him once, Bernard, why do you wear your shirt open to your belly button? And he said, and I quote, because I'm hot. Anyway, and what happened last year in the Brexit referendum and in the Trump election are perfect examples of the full weaponization of these techniques. Now, let's go back a few years and notice that Barack Obama, in both his elections for the presidency in the United States, had made very, very good use of social media in the sense that he got his followers and people who approved of him and people who liked his messaging to retweet or to like on Facebook or to email and forward on messages. And his team, his campaign team, knew very well that this would harness voters who may not in the normal run of things be voters, so young people and certain ethnic groups and so on. They used this technique very, very well, but they used it overtly. That was quite clear what he was doing. He was putting messages out on his own Twitter account and the like, and that was all fairly open. But much more recently, the use of messaging in cyberspace has become rather different. Let me attack it by just starting from something that you may remember in the Trump election campaign, where Trump said one night at a rally, he said, "I am Mr. Brexit." Do you remember that occasion? "I am Mr. Brexit," he said. "You will see." And the reason he said this was that his campaign team had hired a company which had been used in the EU referendum campaign here to very great effect, great success. A company which, on the basis of profiling of individuals and groups, profiling harvested from hundreds of millions of data points in social media, able to identify these groups with extraordinary precision. Lots and lots and lots of very, very little groups of people. And then they tested messaging to these groups. This message for that little group there, and they tested it and tested it and tested it until they knew that that message was really resonating with that group, because that group was liking the message and retweeting it and forwarding it and commenting on it and coming back to it and staying on it for long periods of time, reading it. There were all sorts of ways in which you can measure how much how much grip a message out there in cyberspace is having. And then what they did was, and by the way, and you would have seen this on that Newsnight program about 3 or 4 weeks ago, where they went to where the Trump campaign headquarters was in Texas. There it was, and right next door to it was the office in which this company was based, a company by the name of Cambridge Analytica, where they did this business of testing these messages. In some cases, they tested the messages to get them absolutely right up to 30,000 times. Of course, you can do this with an algorithm that revises the message and sends it out constantly until people begin noticing it and they begin retweeting it, and you begin to get the numbers that tell you that the message is really working. And then what they did, on the basis of this, they did what's now called hyper-targeting. Hyper-targeting is pushing out extremely well-tailored messages to very small groups of people. This message to that group, this message to that group, this message to that group, each message tailored to that group. And in this way, you can get messages out to lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of different groups who may have nothing in common with one another, who may loathe one another, who may not even know of one another's existence. But by this means, you can get a hook out there and you can hook them to your cause or to your person, your candidate, and you can hook that group to your candidate, you can hook that group to your candidate.